So welcome everyone. My name is Anna Ietta. I'm the manager of the National Center for Dance Therapy. It's just a small short introduction for those who want to listen to the French presentation. Si vous voulez écouter la présentation en français, il y a un bouton interprétation dans le coin en bas à gauche, à droite, désolé. Il faut juste cliquer sur ça, puis sur français, et vous allez pouvoir écouter l'interprétation en français, car c'est notre interprète Chantal. So back to English, as always, please feel free to move to the French interpretation. So thank you very much for being here. Before we begin, I also want to thank the RBC Foundation, which funded this series of webinars. I would also like to point out that the webinar is going to be, the workshop is going to be recorded. It's going to later be available on our blog. We're going to try to only record Judith, but sometimes if you keep your camera on, it may show up in the recordings. So feel free to turn it off at any point. In the breakout rooms, we won't be recording, so we really encourage you to keep your camera on then to exchange with the other participants in there. Other thing, please make sure you're muted throughout the presentation. That way the sound quality will be better. So for today, we have Judith Marcuse with us. She's founded the International Center of Arts for Social Change after a long career in dance, which started with the Grand Ballet. And today she'll begin with a presentation about arts and social change. After the presentation, we will divide you in breakout rooms where you'll be asked to create and discuss on what Judith has presented. In the breakout rooms, there's not going to be any translation available. So if you want to be in a breakout room that is only in English or only in French, please write your preferred language next to your name. So for example, Jane Smith, English, or Michelle, Français, and we'll put you in a breakout room with people who speak the same language. Finally, we're going to have about 30 minutes at the end for questions, and you can ask them in the chat, and feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. We're going to copy them and save them to ask at the end. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll let Judith start the presentation. Have a good workshop, everyone. Oh, and actually, just one thing for whoever has asked, the workshop is 90 minutes long. So, thank you.
Okay, merci Anna. Et bonjour à tous. Je regrette, il faut que je parle en anglais. Une fois, je pouvais parler français couramment, mais maintenant, je parle français une fois par année. Alors, merci to our translator, and I'll be talking in English for the rest of our session. Thanks to the center and to Anna for her great organizational acumen, and thank you for coming. Today, what I'm planning to do is to talk a bit about the field of art for social change, also called community engaged art, and to provide a kind of landscape of the field, a little bit about its history and about perhaps its relevance to therapists and to other artists who are working in dance and other disciplines. So first of all, a description of what art for social change is, how we describe it. It's when groups of people come together to create art themselves about what matters to them. This process facilitated by a trained professional artist. So in order to do this work with people who may self-identify as non-artists or as artists, people need to have a bunch of skills, group dynamics, dialogic skills, and basically be in service to the community of people whom they're serving. So it's a very different model from an educational process or from a therapeutic process, although there are lots of similarities, which I'll get to later. But basically, it's a form which strives to surface the thoughts and feelings of people about a particular subject that they really care about. And to do this through specialized processes that are about arts creation. So there's a facilitative process where these special arts-based, arts-infused games and exercises bring people together, but also help them to begin to think out of the box, using images, words, sounds, physical gesture, movement to explore for themselves and in a collective situation, a topic that everyone has agreed to explore. Are there any questions about this definition? Because it's a difficult one. It's a nuanced, yes, Fabienne, you had a question. Do you want to put your mic on?
Yes, so what I'm understanding, it would be like a multi-modality sort of way of approaching an issue or...
Exactly, but using arts-based facilitative processes. So often those processes are more important than the actual products that come out at the end of that process. So we see this work in all kinds of arts disciplines, visual arts, including video. People usually think of murals as just one very small part of the practice. In dance, in theater, in literary and visual arts, literary arts, the work is seen in so many different sectors. It's seen for work with youth at risk, in all kinds of challenged populations, in poverty reduction, in environmental education, with incarcerated populations, in community development, in intercultural conflict, in intergenerational work, with people who are new Canadians, recently arrived refugees and immigrants. And a lot of the work is done with people who have cognitive or physical disabilities, including in mental health and wellness agendas. And it's also seen in the creation of public policy. So to create public policy that is both relevant and effective, when people's thoughts and feelings, and one of the sayings in the field is, people are the experts of their own lives. So the flow of information that comes out of these projects is not from an organization out to the public, which is seen in various forms of outreach that arts organizations do, like pre-performance talks or free art classes on Sunday for seniors. The flow starts within a community, and that artwork and the information flows from within that community to their own community and then out to the public. So this flow is very different from a lot of other community outreach processes. The field has about 80 years of history, about 60, 70 years of history in Canada. And there are hundreds of organizations doing this work across the country. And that's not counting all the independent artists who are doing this work. And many of them have done special workshops or special training, but we believe that the work is so nuanced and so layered that it's really, really important that practitioners, artist practitioners, get sufficient training to do this work safely and as richly as possible. The work is often done in partnership with local community organizations. So everything from a youth serving organization to people working with people with cognitive disabilities, to intercultural work, to refugee settlement. So there's often a partnership with these local organizations. And the idea is that there be training within these projects so that these organizations can either continue working with the artists or can take facets of the work they themselves have experienced and use it in the future. So that's a very long description, but I hope it's clear enough to give you a sense of the field. So the reason this field evolved was because there were a set of principles that started, ideas that started in the UK, in England, basically, around what the role of the arts is in our society, in our culture. And I've just written a paper. I want to read you just a little bit from it, if me. Is my French translation, is my delivery slow enough for the translator? Chantal, are you okay? Is she okay?
She hasn't commented on it, so I think it's perfect, yes.
Okay, so I'll try and read slowly. We fundamentally believe that art making is an essential element for healthy, cohesive, and innovative societies, and that a just society recognizes the right to cultural expression in all its forms, inviting citizens to engage in all aspects of the whole interconnected ecology of the arts. So what we've done is we've created a hierarchy in the arts. We have our high-end, our museums, our ballet companies, the opera companies, our major art galleries at the top. And at the bottom is your daughter who's 3 years old singing in the bathtub about her dog, okay? And everything in between, community choirs, pottery classes, all kinds of artistic festivals, all kinds of artistic expression. And in that hierarchy, it's not about the consumption of art, it's about making the art oneself. It's a very important distinction. I'll go on reading a little bit. We know that creative expression through art making provides us with new ways of experiencing our lives. These processes open up diverse perspectives, clarify and celebrate our relationships with each other and with the world. When we can share our stories, visions, and realities through all forms of artistic expression, the full spectrum of the ecology of the arts becomes inclusive and cultural democracy becomes possible. We express our own unique identities and voices, and these perspectives become part of conversation about what matters to us in all our diversity. Our authentic voices must be present in an essential dialogue about where we are as Canadians and where we're headed, especially now. So if we go back to that totem pole, that hierarchy, what I like to do is this. So everything matters, everything feeds everything else in the ecology of the arts. And then the next thing I do is this. So we make a circle of all those elements of the arts which are present in our cultures. Am I making sense? Does anyone have any questions at this point? I see no hands. Okay, just a little bit more reading. Artistic and creative expression contributes to well-being in mental and physical health, social and environmental justice, in addressing cultural division, prejudice, and racism, and brings absent voices to the forefront as we recover from crises and act for more sustainable futures. Cross-sector collaboration is necessary to deepen and sustain the impacts of this kind of work in hospitals, schools, homeless shelters, daycares, seniors' homes, prisons, and in the fight with climate change. Creative expression becomes a way for us to create hope and action for change. Audiences and consumers become participants. Worldwide, this leads to empathy and insight, as well as to solutions to often complex problems. So that's all the reading I'm going to do. So talking about the field itself and the research that has gone into it, there's a lot of global research right now, easily found. A lot of it is on our website at ICASC, and I'm sure Anna can supply that URL in the chat, that link. One of the reasons why I feel that training is so important comes out of a 6-year research project that we finished with money from SHIRK. And it was the first study of community engaged arts, CEA, Art for Social Change, ASC in Canada. We had 50 researchers working with us over those 6 years. And one of our findings was that there are so many, particularly young artists who want to change the world and don't necessarily want to just do their own art practice. So we heard from literally hundreds of people how critical it is that people be trained in the field. And that's one reason why we have a national mentorship program in Art for Social Change that's been running for a year and which will start up again in the fall, where we partner senior mentors from ASC with less experienced artists who are already professionals. They have their own practices in 6-month projects where they meet every week. And those pairs are partnered with, in the last iteration of the program, with environmental organizations. So we've worked with about 30 environmental organizations, and these relationships are continuing. And we found that what happens as a consequence of these mentorship meetings that happen every week between the mentor and the mentee, and with the community organizations, is that we're building a community of practice. Often artists work in such isolation from each other unless they're working in a company. And so what we're trying to do is connect knowledge, do knowledge exchange, but also develop support for each other and have a voice for the field in Canada. At the moment, we're putting together a national network of organizations doing this work. So let's talk a little bit about dance. Let's talk about dance. Dance and ASC and CEA. There's, as you know, I mean, I know I'm probably talking to the converted here, but I know that many of you are working with movement already in a therapeutic setting. And so much of the work that is done in ASC is embodied work. So there are many similarities between our two sectors. I think one of the major differences is the goals are different. We're not looking to work in a therapeutic context. We're basically artists. We're not therapists or counselors. So what does often happen is there are therapeutic outcomes from the process of people being able to express themselves and to share that expression with other people in a safely facilitated setting. So although there are many similarities, and I'm sure some of the facilitation methods that some of you are using are quite similar to some of the practices in ASC, the goals are really quite different and the methodologies are somewhat different. One of the major pioneers in the field is a theater director, now passed away, Augusto Boal, B-O-A-L. And Boal's work is extremely embodied. So people make images collectively with their bodies. There's no language often with his work, although after the art making has happened, people sit down and discuss what happened. And in those discussions, dialogue takes place. And that's a very, very important outcome of the work. C and CEA is taking place all around the world. The mother lode is in the UK. The work is quite advanced in Australia and in the EU. Those of you who are interested in resources about the field worldwide, there's lots of work. I'm sorry, I interrupted myself. There's a lot of work in Africa, where I've worked, in South America, where I've also worked. And there is work happening in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Taipei, in India. I worked in Pakistan for a while. So the work is worldwide, and there are very few opportunities for people to come together to share their work, which is why we've convened international conferences so that we can actually learn from each other and actually do each other's work during the conferences, the gathering. So I want to tell you a story. Many years ago, I was working with a colleague in Haida Gwaii on the west coast of BC. And we were working with a group of high school students in the one high school in that small community. We had been flown in, and there was one young man who didn't participate, and we had been told that he shouldn't really be part of the group because he had just come out of prison and that he was, I quote, difficult. And he didn't participate. He watched very carefully, though. At the end of our second day, we do an opening circle and a closing circle where we pass around an object. And if you have the object in your hand, you can say whatever you like. It's not a conversation, but it's a way of opening the day and closure on the day. And sometimes these projects last for 7 years, and sometimes they're just a day long. So there's a huge variety in how the work is offered. Anyway, this guy was beautiful. He had a little tear tattoo on his cheek, which was a symbol of the gang he had been involved with, and he was totally silent. We were doing the closing circle, and when the object was passed to him, he suddenly spoke up. He said, "You may be wondering why I haven't done anything with you or have not spoken." And he said, "I want to sing a song." And he tried to get his voice out, and it just wouldn't come. He said, "My grandmother told me that when I was frightened, I should stand up." Everyone was very quiet and very respectful. It had been a chaotic 2 days, but they were very silent. He stood up and he started to sing in his own language. And the other kids knew the song, and they joined him. And they sang a song about being one with everyone. And this is just, one of many stories about what happens when people are given an opportunity to express themselves in a safe environment with other people, to exchange their thoughts and feelings about really what matters to them. And how often are we given that opportunity in our culture? So there are various gradations of control for the facilitator, for the artist who is facilitating this work. Sometimes they will go into a process where the topic has been chosen by their community partner. Sometimes they'll go in with a tentative plan, which always changes, because the participants are partners in the creation of the project itself. In some cases, the project will change radically over, say, a 6-week process. And sometimes people have decided that they want to do a zine together. And that's where the project is headed. But that's just to say that the role of the facilitator in this work has to be incredibly flexible. And that's why having a big toolbox of processes that one can dig into to respond to what's coming at you as a facilitator, and I'm sure this is true for therapists as well, that toolbox is very, very important so that you can improvise in the moment, be porous, take things in, process them, and offer out, at the same time being very present both inside and outside, if I'm making sense here. And it is developed over with practice, and that's why we often recommend that people who are new to doing this work co-facilitate with a partner. So I now come to partnerships. So what does it take to partner as an artist with an organization that has little or no experience of the kind of work you do, or that has a previous frame of what community art is? How do you expand that? How do you develop a really sustainable partnership? What we advocate for is that everything we do in the field is based on relationship. So we take a long time to develop relationship with our community partners, to really listen and understand what they do and how they do it, and where they see their needs in their work, and how this arts-based practice can serve them as well as the participants in a project. So often, for example, if we're dealing with an organization that is in a very challenged community, they'll say to us, well, we need to be able to feed everybody when they come, and we also need to be able to provide them with bus tickets so they can get here. So these collaborations are very nuanced and they take time. You can't just sort of drop in and do the work. These relationships have to be fostered. So roles and responsibilities need to be defined to everyone. We have written agreements, MOUs with our partners, and often these relationships last well past the initial projects. So it's a kind of, again, creating a community of practice around this artistic work. Am I making sense? Can I see people's faces? It's so odd to be talking to blank. Thank you, Yvonne. Yes, thank you for those people who are nodding. Thank you for the thumbs up. Um, so, I guess I just want to emphasize again that this is not about consuming art, it's about making art, and that that is a human right. And that in making art, we're able to surface thoughts and feelings and perspectives that we might not ordinarily do. So I've put together, a list of about 100 facilitative processes that are used in the field. If you go to something called the ASC web on our website, it's all videos culled from about 600 hours of video that were taken during conversations and workshops during that 6-year research project. They're all categorized. So you just click on one of the titles. It might be ethics, for example, and you'll get to see conversations about ethics in the field. Very complicated and nuanced area. Or exercises, or games, or partnerships. So if you're interested, also there are many, many resources on the site. I do recommend a recent book in English. I don't know if François has translated it into French. It's by someone called François Matarazzo, and the book is called A Restless Art. And it's full of examples and case studies of work, mostly in the EU and some in other parts of the world. But it will provide a really interesting set of examples and histories of the work and how it's happening at the moment. I feel like I've been talking forever. Can we do something together? Shall we do something together? Go into breakouts and talk to each other? Okay, I see people nodding. So here's my suggestion. It's a very, very simple exercise. I hope you all have paper and pencil or colored markers or something to design with. I'm going to ask you to do 2 sketches. One sketch about your relationship to your work now. And that could be during COVID or not, but it's putting yourself in the picture. So draw yourself, a little stick figure or whatever, or draw yourself as a color, whatever, and your relationship to your work now. And the second sketch is your relationship to your work in 3 years. 2 sketches. One, my relationship, my challenges with my work now. And the second one, a vision for your work 3 years from now. I'm going to ask you to take some time to do these sketches, these illustrations, and then to share them with the people in the room. Now, there's no compunction to get super personal or to reveal anything that you don't want to talk about. But to the extent that you feel comfortable explaining your sketches, I think that could be a very productive conversation. Does anyone have questions about the exercise? I don't see any questions at the moment. So,
shall I send people in?
Yep.
Perfect. So you just get a notification to join the breakout room you've been assigned to, and you can just go there, and they close automatically after 15 minutes. So have a good discussion. Back, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So, I have some questions. What was that like for you? What happened? Does anyone want to offer a perspective or an impression?
I just want to mention, we will only be recording Judith. We won't be recording your faces or anything, so feel free to keep your camera on and like participate, like you won't be in the recording.
Sorry, does anyone have their hand up? Yes, Elizabeth, yes.
I was very energizing and very, it was great to exchange with everybody. And it's interesting because two of us had similar things in our drawing, and the two others, they had a similar thing also in their drawing. They had like a tree, both of them in their drawing. And we had kind of like this spiral thing. And it was just really great to exchange and to see where everyone was coming from and how the things that we have in common and our goals for the future.
Excellent. And are you willing to hold up your drawing?
Okay. This is now, I'm not a great drawer. And this is in 3 years.
It looks simpler. The second one looks like a simpler, less complicated drawing.
Partly because I felt like we were running out of time and I had to hurry.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for offering that and breaking the ice. Anyone else, would you like to talk about your experience? Hands up. Yes, Yvonne. Thank you.
I felt that having the time to be reflective through art allowed me to be able to communicate and to also listen when when we were sharing. And aside from the fact that we discovered that there were similarities. Sorry, I was in the same group as Elizabeth.
Oh, okay.
Well, but I felt that reflective time really gave us that chance to, as you said, there's something you said, we're experts in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but we found that we had common ground, even in that short little process.
Yeah, it's so simple, that process. And so many of the exercises we do in this discipline are really simple, but they provide a time for us to reflect and exchange. And we don't often have those opportunities. Our culture is so fast paced and sort of looking to the next all the time. We don't sit and reflect on much of anything these days is my impression. Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to show your drawing or would you rather keep it to yourself?
No, I'm okay. I'm okay. So my now drawing looks, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
So the drawing was a relationship to my work now and my relationship to my dance work, because that's what I do professionally, is myself and the screen. I'm always like this. And then a relationship in 3 to 5 years was a group of people under the trees. Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes, an optimistic view of the future.
Yes.
I'll share before we share more. I'll share a workshop a few weeks ago with a group of people in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong Art Center and a university where most of the art students were members of the democracy movement in the town, in the city, and the territory. And it was very carefully put together. There were 56 exchanges of emails because the organizers were very worried that we would be doing something that would put someone in danger. So there were something like 65 people on the call, and virtually no one had their faces on on the screen, and a whole bunch of them were using pseudonames. And we did a similar exercise about yourself in Hong Kong now and in 3 years, because it's very easy to do online. And the responses were twofold: either that, magic thinking, we call it, that everything would be great and all problems would be solved. And the majority of the responses were, well, I'm leaving because it's too dangerous to still be here. And the conversation between the magic thinkers and the people who wanted to keep doing the work but had to do it outside of the territory was extremely interesting when we did that breakdown. I think it helped everybody kind of process where they were at the moment. Anyway, that's just one story of many. Anybody else like to share a perspective? Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you very much. Any hands up? Oh, come on, take a chance.
I can go.
Thank you, Karine. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I really loved the exercise, and it was a bit short for me. I wanted to keep going and keep drawing because I feel like things were coming up to me, and sometimes, like you said, we don't even take the time to pause and just reflect. So it was a nice personal experience, and then sharing was also very fun, and we realized we had a lot in common. And I think mostly in our group, well, for some of us, we wanted to be able to be a bit more free in our practice as therapists and go out of the limitation we felt we were in, or like out of the box. And we think that art can be a great way to do that.
Yes, and as dance therapists, I mean, there is a whole code, right? There's a whole system that's been developed. And for me, I'm 74. And so over the years, the most satisfaction I've ever had in my work is doing something that I have no idea if it's going to work or not. It's that risk taking, right? And no matter what you're doing, that enlivens you and gives you the opportunity to discover new things about yourself and your work. And I think what ASC does is it encourages people to do that out of the box thinking, because they're not using blah, blah. They're not using words that, have the same meaning they think for everyone, when in fact language is very slippery and we often don't understand each other when we're using words. And the way to create a community and dialogue through metaphor, for me, whether it's drawing or movement or singing or patterns, graphics, whatever, that way of expressing oneself through the metaphor is both safe. And what it also does is that people who are looking, say, at an image will have completely different interpretations of what that image is. And that of itself creates dialogue. What do you see? What you see is correct. Don't let anyone else tell you what you're seeing, because so often we're told how to interpret things that we experience or see in our lives. So there again is that notion of people being the experts of their own lives. And that, by the way, comes from another pioneer in the field, an educator called Paulo Freire, I see people nodding. Yes, a great revolutionary educator in South America who, Augusto Boal, the person I mentioned before, the theater director who developed this whole canon of often embodied games and exercises. Theater of the Oppressed is one of his books. Boal worked with Freire, working with landless peasants. And it was a literacy project, but he didn't teach them the alphabet. He gave them cameras and told them to go out and photograph their communities and to look at what needed to change in their communities. and then to bring it back and have a conversation. And through those dialogues, this group, quite a few groups actually of landless peasants, realized that they needed to read and write in order to create some of the changes they wanted to see. So there again, it's metaphor allowing people to reflect on the realities and their hopes and dreams as well. So I hope that makes sense. Thank you, Kelly. And is there anything else you want to add? Do you want to show your drawing?
Yeah, I can show you. The first one, I was like in the box, a bit like in the window stuck, and a lot of thoughts and a lot of things to do and a big pile of books and clock and deadlines to respect. And I could see the path where I want to be, but I'm not there yet. And then in a couple of years, I'm like bigger, more in the center of my life, and I can move, and like the kids or the people I work with are all around, and the sun is nice and shining. It's like freedom, just the freedom of
And your feet look like they're on the ground. You're not floating.
Yes.
You're actually you're grounded. Yeah. I mean, so much information that we convey without even knowing it when we do these exercises, right?
So yeah, it's very nice also to share and to point out what we see in other people's drawing, because then it can bring out some things that I hadn't noticed, you know.
Yeah, exactly. There's an exercise with objects that I use sometimes, where you put yourself, you take any objects, 10 objects out of your backpack or your purse or whatever, and you identify one of them as yourself, and you put that object down in the middle on the floor or on the table, and then you assign elements of your life to other objects. So in your case, or in my case, it would be email and fundraising and dialogue, and you put those objects in relationship to yourself, either close or far away. So for me, for example, if this is my object here, and I'm talking about email, the object is my email will go on top of me because it's oppressive, right? And people work in pairs, and they observe each other's patterns, and then they have dialogue about the patterns. And then ultimately, one person who's the observer takes one of those objects and just arbitrarily moves it and sees what that does to the person who has made the pattern. I don't know if that's clear. It's kind of a complicated process, but it's a very, very, very powerful exercise, and often leads to great insights for people. Do we have someone else who's willing to share?
I also want to add, if a francophone person wants to share, like you can speak in French and we can switch the translation between, like everyone who speaks English can switch to the translation. In case.
Okay. So one more person, Andrea.
Just trying to say something that it's kind of a compliment to what you said. Be the expert of your own lives in arts. And in dance therapy, I'm a dance therapist, so we use the metaphor, we're so interconnected, right? So all the arts for me I use drawings in my sessions, music and so on in my dance therapy. And we say we are the author of our own stories. So we work a lot with this metaphor in dance, and it creates such a beautiful cohesion and communication and connection to the self and to the others in the group. But it's exactly that. It's the same meaning as you say, be the expert of your own lives.
Oh, excellent.
I just want to share that with just such in the same boat and interconnection. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for that. So I thought I left out a deep mentorship program, this program that partners with the environmental organizations. People are paid. So the mentees get $5,000 and the mentors get $2,000 for 6 weeks of work together. So one of the principles of the work as well is we don't volunteer. We subsidize, we help, we pay people for their time. Because so often artists are asked to do things for free, and could you donate a dance for our fundraiser? Well, then I ask, do you pay your caterer? You know, so it's just a basic principle that a lot of us in the field ascribe to. Let me tell you a little bit about some of the outcomes of some of the projects that are happening around the world. Well, I can tell you a little bit about what's happening during COVID, actually, first. So in Halifax, an organization called Wonderneath, a community engaged arts ASC organization, has partnered with a food bank, the provincial food bank, and in every box that goes out to people who are getting the food boxes is an art bag full of all kinds of materials that they can use, with some suggestions for families and elders, depending on where the boxes are going, how to use that. And then there's online workshops as well, if people have access to broadband, which is a problem, huge problem, especially in the north here. We've been working with people in Yellowknife and other places, and it's really a big issue. In any case, that project is now traveling across the country. So in Toronto, there's an organization that's doing exactly the same thing, putting art bags into food boxes. There's been a huge transfer of methodology to online, like everybody else. I think dance is really the hardest one to do the transfers of, and some theater people just won't do it online, some of my colleagues. But people have managed to do sort of collective monologues, or you know, sharing in real time pieces of fabric art, and people adding to it, putting it in the mail, and people adding to it in another part of the province. So there have been all kinds of new methodologies, I think some of which will continue after the end of the pandemic, because we've been able to attach people in Nunavut with people in Labrador or in Victoria, and we get together once a month, and we have people in every corner of the country who would normally not be able to work together. So there have been some advantages to the online work, but I would say for a field that's so sort of touchy-feely, it's been quite the challenge to adapt our methods. But we've managed, and quickly we've managed. And some of the suggestions have come from the participants as to how they would see the work happening online. And so that has worked very, very well for a lot of people across the country. Okay, so here's a couple of examples. A theater project with people who were in gangs and have left the gangs, and creating a theater production that is based on the materials that come out of the workshops. That is performed by people who were in the workshops for their families and for their communities, about how do you get out of gangs. And then in the dialogue with the audience afterwards, suggestions come up for policy change. And those policies were shared with the city-run organization that is dealing with gangs. So new policies. In Pakistan, the project I worked on in some rural villages where women are very much, how can I say, abused, I would say, in many ways. They don't have a voice. We had a terrible time trying to figure out what we could do that wouldn't put them in danger with the men in the villages. And we came up with the idea of doing an exploration of dreams for their children. And that turned into visual art pieces about those dreams. And they did share it with the men in the villages, and it happened. A 6-year project on teen suicide, 3 years of work with 15 to 18-year-olds in workshops using all kinds of arts-based facilitation, using a whole bunch of different methods, evolved into a national tour of a live, multifaceted production called ICE that went into arenas and went into the atria of malls across the country. And it was adapted for television. CBC Network broadcast it twice with a wraparound dialogue. We also produced a shorter version for use in schools for PACs. They're called PACs out here. As a result of that, we know that we know that because letters we received and emails, that people who were considering taking their own lives decided to get help. So, there's so many outcomes from this work. In South Africa, social enterprise that makes high-end paper for printmakers, for artists across the south of Africa, work with women in rural villages to make the paper. And on that paper, they did a long-term project on AIDS, where people took photographs. It's a technique called photo voice that's part of this whole canon of work. They were given cameras and asked to take pictures of things that related to their experience of HIV/AIDS. Those were put together in an exhibition in a downtown city in South Africa, in Joburg, and there were artist statements beside each of the photos describing what impelled them to take that particular photo. And then there were dialogues, and social agencies were there right on the spot with resources for people to take advantage of. There's so many projects. In Ahmedabad, in India, a colleague has a truck, and the side of the truck folds down. And on that stage that they create in the middle of marketplaces, women who have worked with her in workshops talk about their autonomy and about their ability to create economic value for their families. And the play is about what the impediments are to their doing that. And at those performances, there are people who can offer help to women in the audience to access very low rate loans, for example, or various other assistance. I was involved in a 5-year research project in Ecuador, in 4 cities, where the only federally supportive social circus program exists. It's fallen apart now because of the change of government. But for quite a while, street were brought into social circus teaching and community building in those cities, and supported with social workers and others who took care to help them in whatever issues they were dealing with. And I don't know if you know what social circus is. It's a form of art for social change where people are taught circus skills and they work together, and accompanying that is other forms of arts-based dialogue and pure dialogue. And we found the research was like before and after, and we found out that there was a very high return to school, for example, people wanting to re-enter, people who had social issues wanting to re-enter their communities. There's lots and lots of research on this if you want to take a look at what some of the outcomes are. let's see, another example. Where shall we go?
I also want to mention, Judith, sorry, like just trying to be mindful of time. I don't know if you also like want to start getting questions soon.
Yes, I'd love to hear any questions people have, and I'll just shut up and listen.
Sorry, I didn't want to actually cut you short.
No, that's great. I could go on forever, and I mustn't. Any questions?
If you have any questions, just feel free to raise your hands, or if you don't want to speak publicly, you can ask it in the chat. And again, we're happy to welcome questions in French and have them translated. Aurélie? You raise your hand.
Oui, oui, j'ai une question. Donc, ma question, c'est plus de, j'aimerais ça comprendre dans ce que, enfin, par rapport à ce que vous avez nommé, vous avez parlé de beaucoup de différents projets, puis souvent dans ces projets-là, vous avez une posture plus de, vous appelez ça plus de facilitatrice, modératrice. Moi, je me questionne dans le fond sur un peu des fois qu'est-ce qu'il doit y avoir comme relation entre la personne qui est artiste, facilitatrice, mais vous avez parlé beaucoup d'organismes communautaires. Souvent, ils ont des intervenants. Eux, comment que se fait cette relation-là, comment qu'elle se construit ou quels pourraient être les défis, les enjeux que vous voyez là-dedans pour qu'il y ait, tu sais, comme un beau partenariat. Vous avez parlé, fait que, comme vous connaissez déjà plein d'exemples de projets, mais tu sais, c'est vraiment aussi cette relation-là qui, moi, personnellement, ça m'interpelle beaucoup, là, d'essayer de mieux comprendre la dynamique comme artiste, qui arrive dans un projet avec une communauté qui a déjà peut-être ses leaders ou ses intervenants.
Do we have the English translation?
Yeah, so Aurélie was asking how to like you're talking about having facilitators and like arts facilitators, and how can they work together with the intervenants, like the professionals and the staff at the partners you're partnering with, and how you can deal with this relationship and like having leadership issues and like how to lead that.
Okay, that's a great question. Merci beaucoup, Aurélie. Une bonne question. So I had mentioned that it takes time to develop relationship in all aspects of this work. And so it takes a lot of questions and listening. The artist facilitator, and I have to emphasize the artist has to be a professional artist who also has these other skills. And the host organization begin to have a conversation about how this work might help them in their agenda for change. So what do they need? What kind of information would help them to do their work better? And often the artist will go and visit some of the work that, like go to a seniors care center, for example, people working with dementia, for example, and just sit in on those sessions to begin to understand what the host organization does. Then in our example, what happens is a letter of agreement is signed by both parties. So that agreement defines in writing what the roles and responsibilities are of parties who are involved in a particular project. And those roles and responsibilities may change over time, and they usually do. So the agreement is amended. But by putting these initial ideas into writing, it clarifies for everyone who's doing what. And then, of course, the why of that agreement has happened out of the conversations and the listening that has happened. Is that, does that answer your question, Aurélie? Yes?
Oui, oui, merci beaucoup.
Ma plaisir. Mon plaisir. Anyone else have a question? Yes, Karine.
You talked about training that is necessary to be able to do that kind of work. What type of training are we talking about?
We're talking about training in art for social change. So it's very hard to find anywhere. We developed a 2-year master's program at Simon Fraser University, which was too expensive for artists. And I have discontinued it because it wasn't a good fit, and I didn't fit into the university all that well. I'm an autodidact. I left school when I was 15 to go to the Royal Ballet School. So that was one attempt. This mentorship program is the result of all the years of thinking about training. Because I think mentorship is one of the finest ways people can learn. That's how I learned. I accompanied someone doing this work for 3 years. There are week-long or 2-week-long workshops that are offered across the country. We post them on our website, and they differ a lot in how they approach the training. But the general principles of the work are common right across the country. In Quebec, there's not much at all in terms of training, but with online participation now, it becomes possible to get some training in the work without actually being physically present. And a lot of people just accompany other people doing the work and kind of inhale the work. But there are all kinds of resources that you can read. The best way to learn about this work is to do it. Yeah, because you can talk till you're blue in the face and not really understand what it's all about. And the interesting thing is 5 minutes into doing the work, you get it. It's so fast. That little sketching exercise was, just a silly example of the kind of insights that can happen so quickly. So I don't know if that answers you. The scene is not great in Canada for the field right now. The Conseil des Arts, the Canada Council eliminated our sector. And so it's very hard for people to get funding at the moment. And we're in a major process of work with the Department of Canadian Heritage to establish a new program there. Because nothing's going to change at the council for another 5 years or so. So we're hoping that the funding doors open, and also that the conversations happen between heritage and environment and immigrant settlement and health and all these other sectors where the work is actually happening and in some cases is being subsidized. But there's not that much of it at the moment. The cities are the places, city governments are the places where support is happening because they see the impacts on the ground. They're right there and they see it. So the cities are leading the way after 60 years.
Which makes me think, sorry, Judith, but just answering a question that I think, Karine, you actually asked at the beginning of the presentation, but the text that Judith was reading from at the beginning, it's a letter she's going to publish tomorrow. So she's going to send it to me and send it to the participants. So you're going to have it.
Yeah, and you're welcome to send it and send your signature to us because it's going to the minister and, the art service organizations have signed on, a whole bunch of people have signed on. So we just want to make the point that there's another vision, there's another frame for the arts. It's not only about professional artists, it's about people making art themselves and how important that is. And that's not to denigrate professional artists. in any way, shape, or form, but it's an and, it's not a but.
I'll be sending that to everyone, and yeah. There's
I'll
another, go for it. I was gonna say there's another question from Elizabeth. She's asking in the chat whether the mentorship program does only, the work done in the mentorship program has to pertain to the field of climate change and sustainability, or whether it's can have other focuses.
Oh yeah, well for us right now, the next cohort, the next group will be focused on the environmental crisis. But you know, at the moment, what do we have? We have someone doing various forms of art about something she calls queer spawn. So it's the children of LGBTQ plus parents. And she has people in her group who are grandfathers and people who are someone who is 8 years old. And they produced videos and stories and some pictures and all kinds of things. And those will be available in Toronto at a place called Archives, ARQUIVES, which is archives of literature and other things relating to that community. We have another project which is not directly about the environment, but it's a series of science fiction stories about both apocalyptic and magic thinking societies, and environment figures very highly in those stories. We've worked with youth-centered organizations mostly because there was 20 years of work with 15 to 18-year-olds. But people are working with all kinds of organizations, as I mentioned. There's a lot of work going on with seniors right now. And there's a lot of work with hospitals right now. So health and wellness is sort of fairly active in terms of the sectors that people are working with, especially mental health right now because of COVID. There's an organization in Toronto called Workman Arts, Lisa Brown, that has been in partnership with the local hospital, the addictions and mental health hospital there. There are people that have long-term relationships with certain organizations and others that get invited. For example, I have a colleague who works in theater, and he never goes anywhere without being invited. And he's developed these very meaningful relationships with First Nations people all across BC. And so he is invited in to deal with a certain problem that the community wants to address through the ASC work. So it happens in all kinds of settings, in all kinds of ways. We did a visual arts project with seniors about what it's like to grow old. And it culminated in an exhibition of 100 paintings, photographs, installations, videos with artist statements that was exhibited in a theater in Vancouver. So, I mean, there's just so many versions, but the important thing is that the process that leads to these artifacts, to these products, I say it again, is as important, if not a hell of a lot more important than the ultimate outcomes, the products, the art products that come out of them.
Thank you, Judith. We're already 10 minutes late, but shall we take one last question before we leave? Does anyone have any last questions?
I just want to thank our translator, Chantal, merci beaucoup. It's a hard job. And I really appreciate it. When I was working, I worked in Japan several times, and I had a wonderful translator working with me. And by the end of my third time with her, my third visit, she was doing the workshops for me. So I know how skilled people are who are doing this work. And I thank you, Chantal, for that. And thanks to everybody who came and for your participation. Much appreciated.
And thanks to you, Judith. It was extremely interesting. And for everyone, you can watch the recording on our website if you missed something. And I think Eugenie, my colleague, just shared a survey and you'll also receive it by email. So please fill it in if you like the workshop, because it's going to ensure us we have more funding in the coming years. And I'll be in touch with the letter Judith is publishing tomorrow. So.
Excellent. And will we have access to the, oh, and Yvonne has her hand up.
I think she's just saying hi.
Oh, okay. Will we be able to see the chat? Will you copy that?
Yeah, I be able to send it to you, and I can actually send everyone the resources I shared in the links I shared in the chat, so you'll have them.
Okay, Sylvia, it's Augusto Boal, B-O-A-L. I'm just looking at a couple of things now. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night or afternoon if you're in BC. Bye.